Good evening, everyone. Yeah, once my job enters the paid summer vacation, we will be on a better schedule. Yep. Yeah, I was pretty shocked by that post she made on X. Yeah. No, I definitely agree with the Sears Tower. That's that's so stupid. Okay, for one, it's assuming that there would be that Hamas would be the government of a future Palestinian state, and also, I mean, there's not. There is, yeah, yeah. There's that, but as far as the damage done into the Gaza Strip, I've seen so many aerial photographs of it. Um, it really doesn't look like you could do a whole lot. I mean, there are doing more damage to it, obviously, but um, that statement that she made about this war looking like nothing is a load of bullshit. This is already the worst in a long period of you know regardless of what side you are on in this war. Like there's no doubt that the Palestinians have suffered a lot, and this is probably not even probably this is the worst episode in that whole time period in terms of
My microphone is working
in terms
again.
of
Okay, there we go. Sorry. OBS
yeah,
is
in terms of quantitative suffering. It's easily the
well,
largest massacre of Palestinians.
there is the official count is still pretty somewhat similar, although it's going up substantially in the last couple days. Uh but like the official count is not drastically different, but there's a lot of speculation that the actual count is getting into 100,000 people dead.
100,000 dead.
Yes, this is a couple journal articles have come out about this.
I don't know if I. Yeah, I don't know. That sounds that sounds very high.
It is
Um,
high, but it is also speculating that there's a fundamental breakdown in the health ministry that is keeping them from being able to fully report. I don't know if that's the case. For the moment, the current toll stands at like 50,000, um, which is still
which is
higher,
still really, really high.
which would be more Palestinians that have been killed in the last year and a half than have been killed in the entire conflict thus far.
Yeah, since 1948, even
Yes.
yeah, it's a lot.
Um, at any
And if
rate,
you actually do the math, um, Actually, we can do that math. I'm going to be doing some math while we were talking, but if you do the math, given the pre-war population of Gaza, how many people?
2 million.
Yeah.
There's also another part of this too that like is very hard to kind of like really put your finger on, and it kind of comes if you start reading accounts of the Second Intifada. And how does Hamas come to be in control of Gaza? And it's kind of like not at all unsurprising. If you recall, when in the last election here in the United States, 2024, how when Project 2025 came up, Trump vehemently denied engaging with 2025. I've not read it. No one in my administration would enact such a thing. Blah 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 blah. I'm going to do all these things instead. And lo and behold, Trump is in power, and Project 2025, they're at least making a college try at putting it into effect. So a very similar thing happens in Gaza post the Intifada, when they're like electing Hamas to be in control. That candidates aren't running on we're going to impose Sharia law and we're going to attack Israel and blah 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 blah. They're running on change. They're saying here's the Palestinian Authority, here's the Oslo Accords. None of these things worked out. We will do better, and people vote for that. And people voted for that because they were frustrated with the failure of Israel to live up to its commitments. And they're frustrated with the privileges that they saw the officials in the Palestinian Authority being granted. So that's why they voted for Hamas. So, like, when people turn around and say, oh, the people of Gaza voted for Hamas because they're anti Semites and they wanted to kill all the Jews, that's not the case. And really, like, particularly if you start digging into things a lot, you will find that the Palestinians' internal politics tend to be relational to how they interact with Israel more than any kind of anti-Semitic sentiment against the Jews.
So if we take the probably more realistic estimate of 50,000 killed, that is about 13 to 14% of families in Gaza. So about I'm looking at the math. So we'll have lost at least one person in this conflict.
I think the
If we scale that to the United States, that's about 8 million deaths.
Yeah, it's absolutely staggering.
Holy shit.
There are some families in Gaza that have been wiped out. Totally.
Yeah.
The situation, I don't want to say is improving. A few hours ago, Netanyahu made an announcement that they will be letting limited food aid resume in Gaza. He made no similar announcement about the water situation. But they have announced the intention to resume food aid. There is a large-scale ground offensive in effect, and there is nightly bombings that are happening in Gaza. 100 people were killed 2 nights ago, 151 last night. And they have been targeting hospitals again extensively. Khan Yunis Hospital, Indonesia Hospital, both were hit last night. I guess we're doing Israel first because of Brianna Wu.
Yeah.
Never mind my order of things. We'll get to Ukraine in a second. Actually, we're kind of holding out for Maya to get here because that crowd likes Ukraine news a lot. All of which has basically escalated the suffering in Gaza significantly. There have been a couple accounts that says this feels like the immediate aftermath of October 7th, when the airstrikes were at their thickest and heaviest. So if anything, the violence has escalated. A second report came out like 5 or 6 hours ago that suggests that Israel wants to negotiate a ceasefire again, but that would seem to be optimistic to the point of foolishness. So in turn, we kind of arrive at the situation that basically Gaza is on the edge of collapse. Brianna Wu would like it to collapse fuller. Without de-radicalization and a credible government, a Palestinian state will escalate violence, not reduce it. The Palestinian Authority is ostensibly the government of Palestine, and more to the point, like Brianna Wu has made tweets to the effect that she understands this. Like she made a tweet about the West Bank. Oh, I don't want to put that up. She made a tweet about the West Bank where she said, yeah, most of the Palestinians live under the authority of the West Bank, which is a difficult claim to sustain when you consider that Area A is effectively subject to martial law. But still, she understands this. So this particular tweet just seems like almost schizophrenic in its nature. I'm not against peace and I'm not against Palestinian self-determination, except it seems that you are against both peace and Palestinian self-determination. But I am against delusional thinking, which is a downright fucking wild thing for Brianna Wu to say given the last 2 years. And there's me. For someone who claims to be against delusional thinking, although my phone corrected it to he for some fucking reason, this tweet is a doozy. So yeah, the reality in Gaza is, I guess, mixed. And this is kind of against the entire backdrop of Donald Trump's visit to the Middle East, which is, like, I think kind of funny on a very real level. Like, people are making a huge deal out of this jet, the $400,000 jet, or $400 million luxury jet that we have to now turn into a usable Air Force One at the cost of a couple $2 billion that Qatar is not paying for. But if you think about it, there's a really good reason for Trump to get along very well with Middle Eastern leaders. Anytime you read a history of the Middle East, particularly the post-World War II, post-colonial period, everyone makes quick note of how widespread graft and corruption tends to be in Middle Eastern countries. And Donald Trump is really, when you get down to it, his very own Middle Eastern-style graft and corruption.
Yeah.
Like, to a fairly significant degree. So, like, it makes sense that they're getting along so well. They're kind of the same people when you get down to it. What are we doing? Oh, Hamas did 9/11, not George Bush. Neither did 9/11. Al-Qaeda did 9/11. Al-Qaeda and dexterous use of Expedia.com, to quote Attaché Films, we'll be watching a little bit later. I kind of love that comparison, by the way. He's talking about the Confederacy, and like he's making the point that people argue that why don't we admire people like Nathan Bedford Forrest for their generalship and kind of ignore their mass murdering fuckheadness. And it's like, yeah, we could also admire Osama bin Laden's use of Expedia.com. Well, sorry?
Where did the Nathan Bedford Forrest captured him and his forces captured like a what was it? Like it was like 100 something freed black soldiers and executed all of them. What massacre? Where did that happen?
Let me pull up the details and do this right. It's called Fort Pillow. It's late in the war. And fairly late in the war when they allow the mass.
And he was never.
No one was
ever punished for that.
No one was. So Fort Pillow was outnumbered. Nathan Bedford Forrest is a Confederate cavalry commander and later the head of the KKK. So you can tell he was a wonderful person. Just absolutely great. He turns around and there is some consternation. They capture a Fort Pillow, which is under control of a black regiment, and they massacre all the troops there. And the excuse that the Confederates give is that there was a unit moving to relieve the fort. And for this reason, Nathan Bedford Forrest had to massacre those prisoners in order to keep them from unsurrendering.
Yeah, totally.
That's exactly how war works, by the way. Yes, he's also the founder of the KKK. You're correct, Stephanie. Very much the founder of the KKK. He goes to Congress. He gets called before Congress to testify as to the activities of the KKK. He's like, I'm not part of the KKK, and I think they are an honorable organization. There was a general pardon, but there was also not really a lot of effort put into it. So some Confederates fled to South America, which seems to be the destination of white supremacists after they lose. As you might know, Nazi Germany had a bunch of people flee to Argentina. The Confederates fled to Brazil, which is a strange choice when you consider the racial
I knew
makeup of
about that
Brazil.
actually. I remember reading about that. It
Yes,
was something I didn't know prior.
yes. And Jefferson Davis decided to put himself in a dress and try to slip out, but they caught him, which worked out well for him in the end because he got pardoned. Um, Lincoln was Lincoln was very much determined to reunify the nation with as little pain as possible. A lot is said about uh, his death and how Reconstruction might have gone, but I'll be honest, I don't think Reconstruction would have ended differently if Lincoln was still alive.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
Because he was not.
Given what,
Yeah, he was not a hard. When you read histories of Reconstruction, we're way off course, but we're doing this anyway. When you read histories of Reconstruction, you really see it as Civil War 2.0. It's an insurrection. It's an insurgency in modern terms against the federal government, particularly on the part of the KKK. So, in very real terms, I don't think Lincoln would have necessarily done what needed to be done. Grant certainly was much more aggressive about the entire problem than than uh, than why can't I remember that goddamn loser's name? Johnson. Yeah, Andrew Johnson. He employed the federal government much more aggressively against the KKK, things like that. It didn't help that Andrew Johnson's sympathies were with the Democrats. The guy, ironically, who probably would have done a better job and had a much more salubrious effect on America going forward was Thaddeus Stevens, because he had a very harsh view of Reconstruction, taking apart the whole social infrastructure of the South and turning it over and building uh, a new social fabric there. In reality, I think that probably would have worked out better because, like, you still get various leftist outlets every once in a while going, we have breaking news: the freed enslaved African slaves never got their 40 acres and a mule. It's like, no shit. Where'd you find that out? How is that breaking news? It happened over 100 years ago. And the reality is, it was a step too far for most Republicans even to redistribute the property of the Democrats in the South. So ultimately, Reconstruction had this moment where you see a lot of black Republicans getting elected, voting. This surge in Republican power in the South that is very brutally suppressed by the old antebellum order, reasserting itself in the best way it could. And that leads into Jim Crow, and eventually, the civil rights movement and the ongoing issues we have today here in the United States with racial equality. I don't know, again, and it's hard to say whether or not if that particular moment that you have right after the Civil War ends and emancipation is fully realized, it's hard to say whether or not that would have lasted or fixed anything long term, but at the very least, it paints a picture of what might have been if there had been a more strenuous effort to preserve it. There's just ultimately, I'm afraid, too much inertia for the old order.
the when I was an undergrad, I had a really good American history professor who did his specialty, his area of research focus was the Jim Crow South. He wrote a monograph on sort of like a social history of Jim Crow in I think it was like 3 counties in Georgia, close to where he grew up. And he was always of the opinion that, I think this is kind of a consensus now, that the South wasn't punished hard enough.
Well, I would have to agree. I don't know if it's a consensus. I think some people I think it's a consensus amongst American historians who deal extensively with either the civil rights movement or the Reconstruction generally. But I don't know if it's a consensus widely amongst American historians. Someone actually, Titan, sent towards us that we're going to start looking at if he releases things in bigger chunks that I can do longer at times. Christopher Mott has been doing a series of videos about kind of the pushback that the civil rights movement was getting from white supremacists. And the fact of the matter is they had a significant amount of money to pour into trying to unseat and undo desegregation and other efforts. And they basically brought this money forward from the plantation system, and it was accrued wealth that they spent trying to make sure that the Souths remained segregated. So I don't know. I think the fact of the matter is that because the South was able to reassert itself and because it was able to preserve the particular system, the argument can be very easily made that a lot of the problems we are facing today in this particular crisis, because I'm starting to think of this as a crisis for liberalism generally, a lot of those problems are kind of a direct result of the fact that there was no significant punishment that happened after the Civil War.
No, there wasn't.
Speaking of lack of significant punishment, there was a peace summit, sort of, kind of, in Turkey and Istanbul.
It went about.
It was 2 hours long.
Yeah. Let me say this, that the fact that they are doing that is better than nothing. It did result in the release of 1,000 Ukrainian POWs, which is a good thing. Has any progress been made on ending the conflict? No. But it's better than nothing. And yeah, that's about all I can say. It
was exactly 2 hours long.
It went exactly how I thought it would go.
The peace process is effectively a sham for the moment. I think the peace process for Ukraine, and when you get down to it, is really up to it's Russia trying to stall out Trump to get Trump to back off of supporting Ukraine, which has had mixed results. In a lot of ways, Donald Trump has been very wishy-washy in terms of both with Israel lately and with Russia, to a degree I don't think they expected. I think Donald Trump genuinely thinks the support he got from Netanyahu's government and from Putin's government is because they want him to advance American interests. And obviously Russia and Israel are much more interested in advancing Russian and Israeli interests by having a weak president. So Trump comes in here and says, I want to create a peace program, peace plan. And he goes and him and J.D. Vance are, berating Zelensky in the Oval Office. And Putin's like, hurrah. But that's all he really got out of it when you get down to it. And Israel is panicking about these talks in Qatar. They're panicking that there was news for a day and everyone seemed to believe it on Twitter who was an Israeli supporter that Trump was intimately about to announce the formation of a Palestinian state. And I'm just reading this like that would be the most unlikely thing to happen in the history of all the things that would not be happening. That seems to not be happening the most.
Yeah,
But
I
they're
would agree.
freaking out. Like Israeli Telegram channels are now like posting pictures of Trump as a Hamas fighter. And Donald Trump has probably been a bigger supporter of Netanyahu's government in his first term than they have had since George W. Bush.
Yeah, 100%.
And like they're like he's a Hamas fighter. Like what? What are you like? Are you that deranged? You really think for a second that Donald Trump is about to turn around and announce the formation of a Palestinian or the recognition of a Palestinian state? And like trips are being canceled left, right, and center. No one is talking to Israel, and like Mike Huckabee is like talking out of both sides of his mouth, which means he's doing a great job at being a shady ass ambassador. He's like, on one hand, he announced today there are no innocent Palestinians, but on the other hand, he's apparently pressuring them to let food into Gaza. So like the entire media environment in Israel is buck wild right now. Like it's almost fun. It's not fun, but it's almost fun to turn up and like start reading Israeli papers because they're freaking out, just freaking out about Donald Trump and the like what he's doing. It's really quite remarkable. But Ukraine basically said that Russia's demands are non-starters, and they're demanding territory. Russia expressed satisfaction with the meeting. Ukraine said this was idiotic, and they traded 1,000 prisoners each.
Yeah.
And Zelensky's calling for more sanctions against Russia, which I don't think will work unless we start enforcing the ones we have.
Yeah, you really have to. I mean, they have to go after Russia's shadow fleet. Um, I don't know. Um, the way I see it is that I think this conflict is going to go. It's going to last until the Russian side realizes that they can't really gain any more ground.
Which is tricky because for the moment they're slowly but surely gaining ground.
Yeah.
It looks like Russia is opening an offensive in the last couple, well, about the last week. They're massing troops and starting to push.
Where at exactly? Because I haven't been following
up the map
as much as.
I think it's. Let me bring up the map. Not speak out of my ass. Live map. All right. Please stop writing things in Cyrillic. So there are a salient forming for Russia near the H-20 highway coming out of the Donbass. And there's a second salient that looks like they're trying to close in that same sector. The nearest town is Torsk, Toretsk, on the second salient, and the nearest town for here is, I can't even begin to fucking pronounce this, Tarasivka, Tarasivka.
God, Mike Pence is an asshole.
Okay, you're not going to fix my pronunciations of Ukrainian cities?
Say it again, I'm sorry.
Tarasivka, Tarasi.
Tarasivka?
Yeah, I got that pretty close. There's a salient forming there, and there is a second salient forming close to a town called Torsk, Torestsk.
Torsk.
Torsk, that sounds right.
These are tiny salients.
They are,
When
but they're
you're
again. They're off the Dante's axis. I
yeah,
can talk. I swear to God. Which
I'm
is
looking at the
where
salient right now.
they've been driving the entire time. Really,
This grinding sort of
it's a
uh
long advance. I also gather that the North Koreans are behaving very poorly. Uh,
yeah, they've in the rear in Russia. They've
yes,
been I guess they there were even a few cases where they tried
robbing,
to
stealing,
sexually assault some.
sexual
Yeah.
assaults. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, it's being marked as unusual freedom being granted to the North Koreans that they don't have in North Korea. I suspect that they probably behave the same way in North Korea and nobody knows about it.
Probably not. Actually, I don't think they do.
I don't know. Like discipline problems in one place don't seem like they would like not start elsewhere.
It's easier to have those problems when it's not your territory. You know what's
Fair.
interesting?
Okay.
I read a really good. It had its issue. I had some issues with it, but I read a really good PhD dissertation on the Red Army and sexual violence in Europe, and the guy who did it is a colleague of one of my colleagues, who they were under the same advisor at the same time, and he's a Serbian guy, but he he specialized in this, and it's interesting because the Red Army also liberated Bulgaria and the Balkans, particularly Serbia, and what's interesting is he did a case study, compared that to Red Army actions in Romania, Hungary, and Austria. And what we find out is that Red Army discipline, because they enforced it in Bulgaria, even though Bulgaria was one of the Axis countries, they consistently, in their internal propaganda, said that Bulgarians were to be treated well, that they are sympathetic and friendly and Slavic brothers, and they did the same thing also with Yugoslavia. And as a result, sexual violence on the part of the Red Army was very minimal compared to
their conduct elsewhere.
Yeah, the one thing that he missed on, and here's another thing that was interesting. So he's using the Ukrainian, the first and second, I think, Ukrainian fronts. Which one thing I gotta let the listeners know is that, even though they're named this, I think Daedalus, you can explain it too. It doesn't mean that this is like a mostly Ukrainian force. I think what he pointed out was actually, though, that there were a lot of Ukrainians, because as the Red Army pushed, they obviously mobilized people and liberated Ukrainian territory, and also they were made up of pushed back, but they weren't, it wasn't in effect a Ukrainian army, but there were a lot of there.
It's not an army at all. A front in the Soviet parlance is the same as an army group in Western parlance. So
that's what I meant. Yeah.
Yes. So when you hear them use the word front, an army group is a concept that probably has to be explained too. As far as organizations, you'll get a numbered armies, so like First Army, Second Army, Third Army, and you see these reports a lot in World War II stuff. And then you'll see something like Army Group North, Army Group Center, Army Group South, particularly in regards to the Soviet Union. And the Eastern Front, and less so for the Western Front. An army group would be a number of armies under the command of a field marshal, or a front would be a similar thing for the Soviets.
Yeah.
Uh, so like in turn, like these are very large formations. So like they call them Ukrainian fronts, probably because they were generated in Ukraine, but they don't consist only of Ukrainian soldiers.
They're not only of Ukrainians, but and what's interesting too is particularly in Hungary and in Romania, as well as Austria, but in Hungary especially, there were a lot of the violence there was really bad in terms of the sexual violence on the part of the Red Army. And one thing that the author convincingly argues, and I think it's kind of ignored. A lot of people chalk it up to a simple lack of discipline, which is one aspect. It's one part of the problem, but revenge and particularly the internal propaganda had a lot to do with this. And I don't think that that's stressed. It wasn't. It's not always stressed in studies on the topic, and there's been a lot. But and I can definitely speak at length about particularly the conduct of the Hungarian armed forces in Ukraine, as well as the Romanian. But the Hungarians were very much a thing in the area of Ukraine that I did my own case study on. And they were very, very, like, their own, conduct was absolutely atrocious. It was genocidal. I mean, it is a accessory to genocide on the part of the Germans. But that factor definitely played a role in this. And that's one thing that the author points out. He doesn't have a whole lot of context for the Hungarian part of it, but he has very strong arguments for Austria and Romania.
Karasu, I've got to ask, do you just listen to us and wait till we mention Hungary? And you do the same thing this Sunday because you're always here whenever Hungary gets mentioned, like every time.
Let me see your comments.
No. One of the things that kind of is underappreciated, like we talk about the Axis powers in World War II, and we're like, oh yeah, Italy and Japan and Germany, and then they forget that there are other Axis powers like Finland and Romania, and, Hungary, and the satellite states is what they're generally called, because they're either forced into it by Hitler, or Finland very eagerly decided to fight the Soviets with Germany.
Karasu, I have a question for you. There is a book in Hungarian by Christian Ungvari. It's 100% on. I don't even know the name because I don't read Hungarian that I want to work on. And he wrote a pretty. I don't I'm not. I don't agree with Ungvari on everything. And one of my advisors, Laszlo Borhi, is a big. They're not very good friends. But if you can write down the name of the monograph that Christian Ungvari wrote, if you know it, it would be greatly appreciated.
And maintain order, yeah. Actually, Hetman can probably speak to that in some significant length because I only read like 3/4 of his dissertation. It was only the parts he wanted me to correct that I read, for like military stuff. So he can probably answer that question in some detail. What was the front there? Germans advanced. Romanian, Italian, and Hungarian troops had to maintain order. There was some German units that were rear echelon units as well, wasn't there?
In the area of Ukraine, yeah, they were actually they were about either just as numerous or more numerous than Hungarian the Hungarian light brigade or light divisions. Actually, there were light divisions, but they're about regimental size. They were primarily used. The Hungarian light divisions active in the northeastern part of Chernihievska Oblast that I studied. They're involved in numerous massacres and reprisal actions. And just in general, they're remembered very, very poorly, by the local inhabitants. But one thing I will mention is that they get a worse, as bad as they were, certain massacres, like the largest one, like the Koryukivska tragedia, the Koryukivka massacre was not perpetrated by them. And that's actually something a lot of people in Ukraine do not know. There's sort of this wave of revisionism and sort of support among Ukrainian right-wing Ukrainian historians that, want to blame everything bad that happened in Chernihievska Oblast to the Hungarian forces. And it's just not the case at all. But in any case, it's telling when you watch, for example, a survivor of the Holocaust, so a Jewish Ukrainian person, mention, when he's talking about the two forces, he said, Мадьяри хуже були, like they were хуже були за німців. They were worse. They were like, and it's really telling when like survivor says that, because primarily, most of the actual large scale killings of Jews in Chernihievska Oblast were done by SD units and local policemen. So yeah, I mean they have a very, very nasty reputation in that part of the world.
All right. I am putting up a screen share for you. Have you ever seen it? Excuse me. Have you ever seen Atunche films?
Yes, I have. Actually, I've watched a few of his.
Okay. This is something he did a year ago, and I saw it, and I put it in a playlist, and then I forgot about it, and I saw it come up again, and I want to watch it together, and we will comment on it as we go. So, there you go.
Is it extremely long?
It's 18 minutes long. It's going to round us out to about an hour 15.
Okay, because it's getting to be almost midnight here, and I have work tomorrow.
Let us begin. An archaeologist debated Graham Hancock. I have thoughts. This is about how to combat.
One thing I want to mention before we begin. Karasu, no, this is not his book on the Budapest siege. That's a very famous book, and it's even been translated into English, German, probably even Russian. But this particular book of his is only in Hungarian, which is why I had it at my university library, but I couldn't really use it all that much because I don't have any knowledge. Like my Hungarian skills are basically zero. So, but if you can search, maybe there's a way to search for, and let one of us know, I'd be very, very appreciative of that, because there's some good data in a lot of his research.
All right.
Anyway, okay, let's go.
An archaeologist named Flint Dibble went on the Joe Rogan podcast to debate author and journalist Graham Hancock, who has become world famous for his theory that during the last ice age there was an advanced, globe-spanning civilization that was destroyed in a huge cataclysm. So Atlantis, basically, which is something we've talked about once or twice on this channel before. Now, I'm not an archaeologist, I'm not an ancient historian, but I am best known for making silly videos debunking some of the most pernicious historical myths imaginable, and I'm deeply invested in the battle against pseudohistory in the public sphere, especially here in the filthy trenches of the internet. So
it's probably worth noting that anytime you hear someone like antediluvian types, they are very shortly going to follow on with like some Nazi Aryan nonsense pretty quickly. Like the concept of the antediluvian, the post-flood world of Atlantis is kind of like used as a proof positive for wackadoodles that the Aryans existed and they were super advanced and blah 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 blah. So like those kind of views are disturbing because they go bad places really quick.
As you can imagine, I watched this debate and the public's reaction to it with great interest. I'm not really going to talk about the substance.
Were you playing the video?
Debate because again, it's not my area.
Yes, I'm playing the video. It's in the Discord stream chat.
Okay, hold on. There we go.
Are you watching now?
Yeah, I'm for some reason. Okay, here we go. Why isn't it not working for me?
I paused it while you're getting back. Oh, come on, don't do this to me. Work.
Okay. Play it, I guess.
I am trying.
Area of expertise, and other YouTubers have covered Hancock's ideas with much more rigor than I ever could, including Flint Dibble himself, who's got a YouTube channel and a Twitter following. What I'm much more interested in is looking at this debate from a cold and calculating PR perspective. Did Flint change minds? Did he come off well? And are academics engaging in high-profile debate with people who peddle?
It's lagging. Oh, come on. Hang on. Don't you do this to me, Discord. Hello? Can you hear me?
What happened?
Discord crashed out. Let me turn it back on. My internet has been acting up. All right. I've put the stream back up. Are you in?
Yes, I'm in.
All right.
Hold on.
Pseudohistory, a good strategy for combating these ideas? Well, in this one instance, I'm very happy to say that I think this was a huge win. I've certainly got a dog in the fight, which I'm just now realizing is a really horrible turn of phrase, but...
Hang on. Oh, don't you dare. We seem to be having issues tonight. One moment, please. All right, let's try that again.
Anyway, I thought Flint came prepared. He was articulate. The sources and evidence he presented was pretty fucking impeccable. And, you know, in contrast, it kind of felt like Graham brought a knife to a gunfight. And that's kind of miraculous given the venue. Joe Rogan is, of course, kind of infamous for letting some very stupid people come onto his massively influential podcast to say some very stupid things. There was a moment early on where Joe Rogan and Graham Hancock were making bedroom eyes at each other across the table, and Graham was like, "Oh, you've done so much to boost my profile and help my career, thank you." And Joe said, "Oh, well, we've been friends for 10 years, always so good to have you on," etc. And I just thought, oh God, this is going to be a disaster. But I have to hand it to him. Joe was an excellent moderator. He didn't really play favorites, and thankfully what easily could have been a total train wreck was instead a highly enlightening, very in-depth discussion about.
So this is a relatively recent development, but I guess Joe Rogan is getting a little wary of some of his crackpots and is starting to think critically again, which is an interesting development, all things considered.
The merits of the supposed evidence for this advanced lost civilization and the discipline of archaeology more generally. And I think the impact among Joe Rogan's listeners and Graham Hancock's acolytes has been undeniable. Ultimately, people who believe in alternative archaeology, which is sort of the polite term for Atlantis, come to believe in these theories because someone convinced them with what seemed like good evidence. I think that at the end of the day, many, if not most, alternative archaeology people are fundamentally just curious and want to get to the bottom of the mysteries of prehistory and our ancient past. And if they're willing to be convinced one way, I think most are pretty open to being convinced the other way. I'm generally quite cynical about.
So I don't know if I agree with that. Do you?
No.
See, here's the thing. I kind of tend to find that a lot of people who get into that are involved in a kind of cognitive exercise where they don't want to believe the prevailing narrative that is presented by academia, which makes it hard to convince people with alternative evidence because they don't believe you are genuinely presenting them evidence.
No. It's kind of like when you're debating religious people, about, for example, like there's no archaeological evidence to suggest something like the Exodus happened.
And they are very attached to the Exodus narrative, right?
Correct. It's the same concept.
Yeah.
Same concept. If someone's going to deny actual evidence and call it fake when it's not, like you're not going to convince them otherwise when they choose just not to believe it.
Yeah, I don't like, there might be people who genuinely believe the antediluvian theories about archaeology, but I don't know. And this extends more broadly to a lot of right wing counter narratives. I don't know how much of it is not socially motivated, and that makes it really hard to convince them of the process when they're not involved in the process. All right, let's keep going. Just work, you piece of crap.
About internet tribalism, so I was pleasantly surprised, poking around online, to find minds apparently being changed in spaces that have traditionally been very friendly to Hancock. The YouTube comments of the debate itself were mostly not very interesting. A lot of half-baked memes and people bullying Flint for his appearance, which is just par for the course, and says nothing about Flint himself. I mean, people bully Margot Robbie for her appearance. It's just part of the price you pay being a public figure. But of the comments engaging with the substance of the debate itself, my read was that it was mostly very encouraging. People enjoyed the debate. They learned a lot. They had respect for Flint for coming on and discussing the topic amicably. One or two even explicitly said that Flint had changed their minds. The Joe Rogan subreddit is overwhelmingly in Flint's camp. There are memes making fun of Graham and general skepticism about his claims. People are particularly critical of what they see as the chip on Graham's shoulder about how he's been treated by mainstream archaeologists, which, I mean, to be fair, yeah, he did dwell on the criticism he's received quite a bit, excessively even.
That's a very clever way of cancelling me. No. Cancel culture at work.
In the Graham Hancock and alternative archaeology subreddits, it was a bit more of a mixed bag of opinions, but that in itself should say something, since this corner of the internet is Atlantis' home turf. There was a lot of defense of Graham, to be sure, but there were also plenty of people who claimed to be fans of his, expressing disappointment with his performance during the debate, and even some distancing themselves from him or saying that Flint was causing them to seriously question the merits of Graham's theories. So yeah, that's pretty incredible. Obviously, an afternoon spent browsing comment sections is not a great data set or whatever, but and only time will tell if this debate will actually put a major dent in Graham's reputation or whether everyone will have just forgotten about it in a week or two. But in my opinion, I think Flint gave Pseudohistory a...
All right, hang on a second. Hetman, I'm about to switch to my hotspot to see if that works better.
Okay.
Maybe I'm going to switch to my hotspot. Hang on. All right. All right. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, I know it's due to network conditions.
You want to pick up maybe on
Graham's reputation
the review
or
of this?
whether everyone will...
Yeah, we're going to have to call it because this is breaking.
Yeah, why don't we continue? I mean, I want to do this because it's really hilarious. I always love this type of pseudo history.
I don't know if you're going to be here Wednesday, obviously.
Wednesdays might be tough, but next Sunday.
So what's going to be going on this week?
Next Sunday will be easy.
Yeah, that's fine. Next, yeah, obviously Wednesday will be tough. Sorry, I forgot. I'm a jackass. So I'm going to bring back Ultimate General Civil War this week. Probably tomorrow. So stay tuned for that. We'll be fighting the battle of we'll be fighting the preliminary battles part of Fredericksburg and going from there. On Wednesday, I think if Hetman's not here because of a long ass discussion, I'll be taking a look at Queeman and Lonerbox's really disturbing discussion on Zionism that they had. I have feelings and thoughts. To preface this, Lonerbox is weird and should probably stop defending Israel because he's making it worse. With that, I think that is the end of our announcements. Anything else you got, Hetman?
I want to thank Karasu for letting me for finding that book actually, and hopefully I'll be able to obtain a copy soon. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank
you all. Have a wonderful evening, and we will see you Sunday.
Thank you, everybody. Have a